And thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of The Dark Place. We're the podcast that dive into the shadows of true crime, and we like to shed light on the human psyche and the complexities of human behavior. I'm your host, Adam, and in today's episode, we're going to be exploring the chilling and controversial tale of Sean Sellers. But before we dive into the show, please go like or subscribe to our YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook channels. The Other People Show. Now, this case has intrigued and shocked and divided people for many, many years as it dives into the issues of crime, religion, mental health, and redemption. Join us tonight as we attempt to unravel the complex mind of Sean Sellers and explore the many facets of his story. Please share this live video. So our journey starts in the heart of Oklahoma City, where young Sean grew up in a world that was anything but ordinary. From an early age, he exhibited a fascination with the occult, a fascination that would later collide with the ordinary world in a very, very shocking way. Excuse me. So, in 1985, the unthinkable happened. We'll jump right to the crime, because before this was actually brought to my attention, I didn't really know a lot about Sean Sellers, to be honest with you. So our journey begins in 1985, where the unthinkable happened. At the age of 16, Sean Sellers committed a series of brutal murders that shook the community to the core. The victims included his own parents, his mother and father, adopted mother and father, and a store clerk. So you might be asking yourself, what led to the seemingly troubled teen? What led him to commit these horrible, horrendous acts? So tonight, we're going to dive into the details of the murders and the trial that sparked a nationwide debate. So let's move on. On March 5th, 1986, 16-year-old Sean Sellers killed his mother and stepfather, Vonda and Lee. He killed them in their bedroom when they were asleep. He was only wearing his underwear to cut back on the blood splatter. And he also had he also had, blank, almost disassociated, disconnected expression and feeling. So he's in his parents' bedroom, wearing only black underwear to limit the blood splatter on himself. He shot his stepfather first. That shot woke up his mother, whom he shot in the face. So Sean, he has been dabbling in a little bit of witchcraft, a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons leading up to this. We'll get into that in a little bit later. But what happens now is that he woke up. Well, pre-planned this, so we think. He shot his father. It woke up his mother, shot his mother in the head. So he tried to disguise the crime scene, though, as it was more of a like an intruder that had tried to break in and kill people. So he does that. He goes with his friend, tells his friend what had happened, stays at his friend's house, falls asleep, and then the next morning comes back to his house, runs inside, walks inside as if he doesn't know anything that happened, goes inside, and then he runs out, causing a commotion and a panic. Someone killed my parents. Someone killed my mom. They killed my dad. He's very, very convincing. So during the Sean Sellers case, there was kind of a it was there, and I was doing some research, and come to find out there was like a big, intense moral panic known as the Satanic Panic that was going on. A lot of satanic, things, demons, Satan symbols were being tossed around. A lot of the things, if you listen to a record in reverse or cassette tape in reverse, there's satanic messages. So that kind of thing was already floating around in the subconscious and the conscious mind of the average person in 1985. So many people did believe that the network of Satan worshiping cults was responsible for various crimes around the cities in America at that time. So at the time, you could see why this might have created a little bit of hysteria and had a significant impact on how the Sean Sellers case was originally perceived. So let's get into a little bit of the religious beliefs and social fears that played a role in shaping the narrative for this case. So let's get back to, the case, the crime. Let's get back to a little bit of the history of Sean Sellers. So Sean Sellers was a child. He was from a broken home. He was shunned from family members. He was not shunned, but he was shipped pretty much from family member to family member. No one really wanted to take care of him for the most part. And he finally never did really develop a good relationship with his parents. And that's kind of how he came to learn about the Satanism, is that he was with a babysitter. And the babysitter on multiple occasions would bring satanic books, magazines, cool things. And Sean Sellers was a very impressionable 8-year-old kid at this point. So all these things are coming around being by this, this babysitter. So he starts becoming interested in the occult. And he was smart enough to know, though, in his young mind, that although, he was being impressioned upon and influenced by these materials, he knew enough to know not to tell anybody that he was actually into these things. And you have to think, it's not like now you can just go to Google and type in satanic rituals or the Book of Satan or things like that. This was things that you would have to seek out in a library. Maybe the babysitter brought him certain reading materials, things like that. So, so the satanic things that I guess that influenced his young mind, he continued to dabble in that. And he did that for many, many years. So by the age of 16, in September of 85, Sean had murdered a 32-year-old store clerk with a handgun. And why did he do this? To see what it would feel like. According to testimony of his friend and the only witness to the killing. 6 months later is when Sellers took a revolver and murdered his mother and stepfather, as they slept in their home. So he does this 6 months earlier. He goes into a convenience store. I think it may have been a 7-Eleven or a Circle K. And he goes into the convenience store. The clerk will not sell him beer. His friend Richard is with him. So he goes in, shoots the store clerk, and I'm not really 100% sure how he got away with it. But he did get away with it, and he got away with it for 6 months. Now, maybe there were security cameras that didn't work. You have to think this is 1985 when this happened. So it wasn't like there was a lot of technology like there is now. Like now, I'm surrounded by five screens, and then I've got the iPhone, so six. But back then, you were lucky to have a little monitor and have a camera recording in the corner, and often it was in black and white, not the best quality, and often with no sound. So, in the years that followed, his personal interest in good and evil continued to develop. God against Satan, vampirism, and the game Dungeons and Dragons also increased his fascination. And you have to think there was a Saturday morning cartoon of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's where they get pulled into the game, and the game is the cartoon, and it was a role playing game, and it was a very popular thing in the '80s, and I think I think it's still popular to this day. But that was also seen along the lines at that time as dabbling in a little bit of the occult or satanic things. And this was during like we said, during like the hysteria years. So this was kind of subconsciously going through a lot of people's minds. So, like we said, he had kept a lot of this private from adults or his parents until he met up with a childhood friend with similar interest in his early teens. Then he began to practice satanic rituals on a regular basis, he said, like drinking blood, self mutilation, and reportedly devoted his soul to the devil at age 15 in 1994. So there's a lot that's going on behind closed doors, and his parents don't know about it. His grandparents don't know about it. He's well behaved. He has good grades at school. He's not getting to any kind of trouble, but yet he kills someone no one knows. For 6 months, that goes unsolved. So, during a little bit later in his high school years, it became more publicly known among his friends that Sellers had an interest in evil and Satan, writing things. I renounce God. I renounce Christ. I will serve only Satan. Things like this on his notebook. To his enemy's death, and he did this when he was at Putnam City North High School in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So there was a professor of criminology from the University of South Florida. In her book, Understanding Parricide, When Sons and Daughters Kill Parents, she wrote, as discussing the Sellers case, how he started a small group of friends when he was 15, and they called themselves the Elimination. Compromise of equally minded people who focused on theories of good versus evil and who carried out rituals in the belief that they would evoke the power of Satan. So when he was about 15, right before the killing spree began, he started gathering with a group of kids, teens, and wanting to conjure up things, wanting to evoke the power of Satan. So what he tried to do was try to work through each of the 10 commandments one by one. They finally reached "Thou shalt not murder," leading directly to the murder of Robert Bauer on September 8th, 1985, the store clerk. Sean Sellers and his friend Richard went to the convenience store that night, and on entry, Sellers raised his gun and opened fire when Bauer refused to sell him alcohol and was only doing his job. And, that's how it kind of began. Sean Sellers was going through the 10 commandments, and he was breaking every commandment. So in addition just wanting to kill someone to know how it would feel, he's doing this with his elimination group. Now, later on, the elimination group, they kind of break up, they kind of go their separate ways, and Sellers dives more towards satanic practices. He keeps those strong. He continues to do those. So, as we said, March 5th, 1986, he goes in, he shoots his mother and father, and his mother was only 32 years old, and his stepfather, 43-year-old. In his own words, written in his journal, Sellers says, after the days of sleep deprivation, drug abuse, and low mood, he had carried out the double murder, a period of time in which he had no memory until the days later when he found himself inside a jail cell. So later on, he claims, I have no recollection of anything that happened. I was having sleep deprivation, wasn't able to sleep, tossing and turning. I was taking drugs, abusing the drugs not said. He was in bad mood. He was in a low mood, unstable mood, and he carried out this double murder. So, I've been sleep deprived, excuse me. I can't say that I've really abused any kind of drug other than, no, I don't think I've ever abused any drug, but I have not had the medication that I've needed at certain times. And I have been in low or terrible moods, emotional moods, but I have never, ever committed a double murder and not remembered it. He said, I had taken my father's .44 revolver and I shot both my parents in the head as they slept. In a year, the memories of that night would haunt me. I had stood in front of my mother's body, convulsing, watching blood pour from a hole in her face. And I laughed, a hideous giggle, he wrote in the diary. So in the years before his execution, because Sean Sellers also holds the distinct crown of being one of the only teens charged with murder to actually be executed. He's been one of the only ones. And he was executed at 29 years old, but charged for murder at 17. So in the years before his execution, sitting in a prison cell with a death looming before him, he published his journal on a website that was set up by the supporters. So this was in 1999. About the murder of his mother and father, he then wrote, I wasn't committing murder. I was removing an obstacle from my way. I was knocking down a door to a prison cage. All I felt, however, was coldness. So his story seems to have changed, and it does change because he does get saved in prison. But before that, after he does get sentenced to death, after the case, we won't go into that a lot because it could go on. Sean Sellers' life took an unexpected turn. He began to embrace Christianity. He sought redemption for his crimes, and his transformation sparked debates about the nature of forgiveness and the potential for rehabilitation, even for those that have committed a heinous act. Now, I guess the eye is in the beholder because everyone has committed some sort of atrocity, some sort of crime, some sort of wrongdoing against someone else. Not to the extreme of Sean Sellers. But how much or how difficult is it to forgive someone for petty little things? Things that are really inconsequential. Imagine that. How hard it would be to try to forgive someone that killed a loved one. How hard would it be to forgive someone that's taken a loved one from you? I'm not one to say because I do not know. But his transformation into Christianity, he was on Oprah multiple times through his through video. He would have reports go out and would write in journals, and he was a big deal, and he would be interviewed quite often. But when you go back and you watch some of the interviews that after he's made his, after he gave his life to Christ, you can see, or at least I could see, some of the manipulation that it seemed that he was festering right below. You could kind of look and tell that he was an intelligent individual, and he had probably studied upon Christianity, the act of forgiveness. He even tried later on to use his being saved as a plea for, I shouldn't face the death penalty. So that's not really for me to say, but what happened in this case was Sean Sellers died of lethal injection in 1999 at the age of 29 years old. 13 years after he committed the murder of his mother and stepfather, 13 years and 6 months since he committed the act of murder against the store clerk. And it is it's very unsettling to know that these kind of cases still do happen. So let us reflect upon this complex story, and please do some more research if you're interested. This is a haunting portrait of a young man, a young manipulator that dabbled in satanic rituals, that dabbled in Dungeons and Dragons. And he took the life of 3 people. The story of his life is a complete reminder that human behavior can be both deeply perplexing and profoundly transformative. As we wrap up this episode of The Dark Place, remember that the darkest stories, there's often a glimmer of understanding that can help us navigate the complexities of our world. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And until next time, keep exploring the stories that challenge our perceptions and enrich our understanding of human behavior. Have a good night.